avoidance of something and storing that emotion
Yeah.
and being able to release it through expressing it.
Great question. Now, if there's a two-part answer to this. So we never, ever, 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 ever tell anyone to avoid their emotions because their emotions are telling them everything. But in the moment that you feel the emotion, let's just say the emotion is guilt. And I'm going to give you an example, a practical example in just a second. The emotion, say, is guilt. You want to feel it because you want to know what you're feeling. You don't want to ignore it. And I know what you mean. For years, people were taught, don't feel it. Doesn't matter. Don't feel it. Don't feel it. A lot of, as an aside, a lot of Valium prescriptions in women in their 70s nowadays who, when they were postpartum 40 years ago, they were trained. I don't know if you have grandmothers like this, but there's a lot of people who are in their 70s because back then, 40, 50 years ago, we're like, well, if a woman's anxious, just give her Valium. Don't let her feel it. And she was trained, don't feel it, don't feel it, don't feel it. So it built and built and built in her body. So you want to feel it. But then after you feel it, you could express it if you want, but sometimes expressing it, sometimes, depending on the situation, actually worsens it. But your best bet is when you feel it to say, okay, just stand there and go, okay, what's my mind? What's source? And I'll give you an example. I had a client in yesterday. He's so lovely. He did this weekend workshop back in a month ago in October. And he was brand new to this material. All of it was brand new. The whole concept was new. He's in his 60s and he has prostate cancer. And it wasn't like, guys, with an illness, it's not like you wake up one day and all of a sudden it happens. But so before that he had alcoholism, before that he had 2 marriages. Like, before they did a shoulder issue. It's not like he woke up one day. It's things lead up to it. So we were talking about the emotions because he had done this workshop. He had the tools. He had the words. He knew these concepts. So we could move much quicker through a one-to-one session because he had these concepts down. And one of the things that stuck in his shoulder as to why his shoulder doesn't move is a combination of guilt and anger. So we were playing around with the guilt and playing around the anger. So he's in his 60s. So I said, okay, what's the guilt about? He said, oh, my kids, when this one was 20-something, when this one was 40-something, I left that wife, I did this. All right. But it perseverates in his head. Like you were saying, it's a thought that goes over and over again. And all I said to him was, let's tell the story differently. Okay, how do I tell the story differently? Okay, so if I tell the story differently, can I overlap with source? So his story was, he's 22, lives up north somewhere, knocks up a lady, right, gets her pregnant, and, like I said, he's in his 60s, and so this is 40 years ago, gets her pregnant, and back then they didn't do ultrasounds all the time, so they didn't know it was twins, right? And so they didn't have a lot of money, and then at delivery they're like, there's 2 here. And he just about has a heart attack because he was barely making enough money, right? Long story short, the 2 kids come out. He married her out of obligation, right? Now the kids are 4 and 5 years of age approximately, and he's being the dad, like an amazing dad, taking the kids to hockey, doing this and doing that, but is realizing he's not happy. Then decides to leave. And it was a life-saving maneuver because if he had stayed in that relationship longer, he would have gotten sick quicker. He was just telling me about the marriage. It wasn't a bad marriage. They just didn't get along, right? So, and now he is 55, how many years later, 30 years later, still feeling guilty about that decision. But the kids, they're fine. They're grown up. They're married. They have lives. They're doing okay. And he holds on to it so strong. He holds on to it because it's his definition. And if I don't have that, so I say the story in a different way. I left because it was life-preserving. Because I chose to leave, I had this and this and this event, had this occurrence. But because the guilt is so strong in his body, he drinks to cover it up, right? Because it's so painful, quote unquote. Then when he left here, I retold the story about 6 or 7 times for different events in his life. He was driving a Harley last summer. Driving a Harley, drunk. Driving up into Coca-Cola, and he goes over and falls over. He's fine. The bike's whatever. Falls over, hurts his shoulder still hurts, but holds guilt. Still, a year and a half later to this day, no one was hurt. I should have known better. It's like, but do you want to hold on to that if that emotion doesn't let your shoulder move? Could you say it differently? I, quote unquote, gained greater acknowledgement, greater insight that I don't want to drive drunk anymore. So again, here's where they want me to go to here. There was contrast, that my bike fell over, and because I was drinking, and the clarity is I want to drive. I want to drive now without alcohol. What's happening for him is he's staying in the contrast, being, he's not driving drunk anymore. He's in the clarity already, but he's still making himself wrong. Do you get it? And that's where the emotions come in. And he was exactly what you're describing, had emotions physically, but was never trained what they meant, so he just shoved them down. And they're creating illnesses and ailments in his body. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? It's a long answer to a short question. And you'll find that I do that. I'll give you a long answer, but basically, want to express it if on expression you can shift the energy only if on expression you're not doing it from, see, this is a big thing. Let's just say you're angry about something. Let's just say. What my suggestion would be, let's just say your husband made the pie wrong. Okay, did the pie wrong. I left you the recipe. You know you do the pie. The pie is important. We have a party coming up. Don't you know better? So your mind is here, your source is here. Instead of getting angry, you have the emotion of anger. What I would tell people, this is what I try to practice in my life, is I do my best to, before I respond, so the event has occurred, the pie is wrong. Got it? My response is pure, like you should know better, anger, da-da-da. What I try to do to create the gap, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this, is I go in my mind, okay, what is my mind focused on? My mind is focused on the fact that, say, Ed doesn't make pies, but I'm making a joke of this one. Let's just say Ed didn't follow the recipe correctly. He should know better. And my mind is focused that way. And the emotion is anger. Then what I do is I do anything I can before I say anything to him to get my mind overlapped here. And what I would say is I make general statements like, at least he tried to make the pie. That was really sweet. He went and got all the ingredients. He stayed home for 3 hours. He tried his best. And then right there, if you can feel it, I can feel it in my body, right there, my mind is closer to spirit. Then when I go to talk to him, I'm like, sweetie, I'm so glad you tried to make the pie. You did it's so lovely of you. Just so you know for next time, you forgot to put this ingredient in there. Or whatever.
And then emotions just dissipate.
Exactly. Do you get it? Versus, Ed, you did the pie wrong. I can't believe you did it. Does that serve anybody? No. And why I have my hands like this? Because I've stayed like this. Got it? Where is my power? My power is when I do that first, before I respond. Got it? Most people think their power is, here's my differences, my mind and my source. I'm just going to respond because what? I'm right. What happens? My emotions are right. What you just said is a clincher for a lot of people. If I'm feeling, then that must be I'm right. Well, wait a second. Side story. I have a client who I love. She's got chronic pain, and she knows her chronic pain. She's smart. She's smart. She's in the energy healing program up at Langara. She's a smart woman. She knows this because Sarah, the family, idiot family, that's how she thinks about her family. Source is like, family is amazing. But because her emotion is anger at the family, and she wants to feel her emotion, she expresses the emotion. And she thinks that by doing that, I'm honoring my feeling. Well, you're honoring your feeling. We get that expression. But are you doing yourself any good? And the answer is no. Got it? Because there's no overlap, right? In fact, what's happening is it's actually making this gap bigger. Her pain is getting worse because she keeps expressing it. When you express from here, right, over and over and over again. And so I've tried to work with her to get over here. She won't do it. The reason she won't do it is why? She wants to be right. Do you get it? I want to be right. He did this. I can't believe it. And so on and so forth.